Molten Touch, Dark Vein, Bell Slash. I don't have enough money to rename all of my childhood edgy names. Time to make videos on YouTube. So I've been watching a lot of WoW related videos for the last couple of months. And man, is it refreshingly depressing. It's really hard not to jump on the bandwagon and start throwing jabs at Blizz for the questionable stuff they've been doing with WoW, but I feel like any more shit thrown their way would just make Two Girls One Cup look like a rom-com. So I want to make a series of videos where I give my personal feedback in a more constructive manner. I don't have any sort of game development background, so this will be entirely based on my own personal experience with the game, and I know that essentially equates to another retarded gorilla on the internet throwing its shit at people.
I didn't point at you. I didn't point.
Look. Oh shit, god damn it, look. Oh,
God.
Oh fuck.
Are you okay?
But I feel like I need to throw out my 2 cents on the current issues of BFA and have discussions with people and find common ground so that maybe the game can improve in some meaningful way and a consensus can be reached within the WoW community. Maybe. Now, I know that I'm really late to the party on this one, but the first thing I want to talk about is Island Expeditions, one of the 2 newest pieces of content added with BFA. They're kind of boring. And I'm not saying that in and of themselves this feature has no value. In fact, I think the potential to be amazing is huge, but there's a larger problem that causes them to feel so unfriendly and kind of a waste of time. I'm going to make the assumption that if you're watching this video, you already have a bit of knowledge of the game, so let's go through a little journey to put things into perspective. You are a level 110 character, and you're ready to start the content of the new expansion. What do? You go through the leveling process, which essentially means following quests in a certain narrative and fighting off tons and tons and tons of NPCs that provide no challenge at all. Throughout the leveling process, you also go through a few normal dungeons in the story, which means following a certain path in the dungeon with a group of 5 people and fight off tons and tons and tons of NPCs that provide no challenge at all. A recurring theme here. You reach 120 and you do heroic dungeons, world quests or LFR to gear up a bit, which means more fighting tons and tons and tons of NPCs with no challenge at all. The only time this monotonous journey breaks is when you start doing a Mythic Plus, which is all of the dungeons you've already been through, but now they actually do stuff. And raiding. It's sad to say that no matter the amount of awesome cinematics, cutscenes or lore Blizz throw out at you, it doesn't change the fact that the game has evolved in a way that, regardless of the patch you're playing, all you seem to do is fight endless waves of nameless, faceless NPCs. And that is an issue that is quite prevalent throughout recent expansions, but I will discuss that in more detail in another video. And now, Island Expeditions, along with Warfronts, find themselves in the horrible position of completing the NPC farming simulator that the expansion unfortunately felt like for the length of 8.0 and 8.1. While this is not purely the fault of these new features alone, you'll be misguided to ignore the untapped potential in them, since they are still supposed to be some of the major selling points of BFA. Islands are kinda like dungeons, but there's only 3 of you as opposed to 5, and that doesn't really add anything to the experience. It only means that the instance needs to be easy enough so that 3 completely random people that don't follow any particular meta or build can do it if they at least try to do the objectives. So you're not required to have a healer or a tank or anything specific at all. Any 3 specs together can do this. And that's a huge letdown considering the hype that went behind these things. When I first heard about island expeditions, that they're supposed to be these treasure hunting exploration things with cool objectives and power-ups that also had PvP in them, I was super hyped, man. I was expecting an amazing, fun, fast-paced, swashbuckling mindfuck of an experience. But after having done a few and my brain went completely unmolested, I felt more compelled to look up the word expedition in the dictionary.
Are you frustrated with God?
To my surprise, islands kind of do match their meaning in the dictionary. I mean, you kind of explore the few meters of land on them, and there's no research, but there is war. Not so much a war between Alliance and Horde, but more of a war on all forms of life except for the Alliance and the Horde. Not to say that everything should follow textbook, but the intent here is to create a fun system. And granted, a lot of my expectation at the time was inflated by my lack of knowledge. It was still disappointing that I got fed up with them completely after only a few weeks of doing the weekly cap. I personally feel like island expeditions would have been more interesting if they focused on gimmicky types of content, like the Kirin Tor Western Legion. Have them be these mysterious islands full of ancient ruins and crypts that you have to go through and solve puzzles and mazes and do platform jumping, and have all sorts of secret rooms where you can find extra artifact power, mounts, gold, materials, whatever. The advantage with instance-based content is that you can play around with the rules of the game and do things that have never really been experienced in WoW, such as infiltration missions or smuggling missions, something that feels new because it's not a type of gameplay that you commonly find in WoW, but will still feel familiar because you deal with these situations put in front of you with the strengths of your character that are clearly defined in WoW. And to take it a step further and make it a really unique feature of the game, I would love it if these islands would have different paths that you can take to reach your goal, each of them depending a little bit on the class composition that you have. So let's say, for example, you play a mage and you go on a smuggling mission and you get grouped with the priest and the rogue. You are 2 casters, so it's more profitable to go down the wing that's weaker to casters. But you also have that rogue in your group, which might have his own path to make with lockpicking, giving you 2 viable options to complete the island. That way you would have completely different experiences every time you queue up. Of course, this could be tuned to where on normal you can just do whatever, and the more you go up in difficulty, the more you have to follow the proper paths. What I'm trying to say is, I'd like for heroic and mythic islands to feel like they're actually heroic and mythic. Not just the same NPCs with cracked up numbers and an AI that, despite all of the development put into it, only serves as a nuisance rather than a fun element. Small things like jumping puzzles in Suramar, the weird trial things on Argus, and the Kirin Tor quests showed that not only can they do interesting things, they also want to. So put them to good use to enhance the experience of the game instead of making it feel cluttered with just more of the same. So this all sounds pretty well and good, right? But would Blizzard actually implement this kind of stuff in their game? And if you really think about it, why even bother making videos like this in the first place? I mean, Activision Blizzard are clearly Illuminati space lizards that only enjoy eating babies and making money.
These things are in the control of powers that are beyond our understanding. You heard the term wormhole. People think this is space, something in space. Mistake.
They don't give a shit about the game or the community, to which I have to say, well, fair enough, dude, but humor me for a moment here. No, I don't think Blizz will implement this kind of stuff in the game. At least not for the length of BFA, and for good reason. First of all, these ideas for islands would not be viable for PvP, and Blizzard intended them to be neck-level progression systems for both PvE and PvP. Although, I'd be really hard-pressed to believe that PvP players are actually enjoying PvP islands, but whatever, let me know in the comments. Second of all, they've already invested heavily in the development of their new AI, and most likely by now, they already have the rest of the expansion pretty much planned out, and can't really make huge changes just like that. However, they do listen to the community despite the common perception they get nowadays. For example, back in Pandaria, the hot topics of debate were how Blizz aren't using the open world anymore, and how dungeons are becoming irrelevant and there's far too few of them. And they have been focusing on these pieces of content ever since to try and improve them for the best. In Warlords of Draenor, they found out the hard way that simply introducing chest rewards out in the world that only help you marginally improve an already boring outdoor experience is not that great, since you can only find toys and garrison resources and maybe some crap gear. So in Legion, they introduced world quests, which Frankenstein together daily quests with outdoor activities, a little bit of professions here and there, and the reward chests were the emissary chests, which could give garrison resources, but also gold and legendary items. There were still random chests as well in the world, but they continue to only give garrison resources or mission table resources, whatever. And dungeons, well, they have actually been struggling with dungeons for way longer now, with them being either too useless in some patches or too good to miss out in others. Some of them were too obnoxious, some of them too simple, and they tried all sorts of shit to make them relevant. Back in Pandaria, I think, was the first time they introduced challenge mode, similar to Mythic Plus Dungeons, but horrible in almost all aspects. First of all, they scaled your items down to match the strength of the dungeon, and that meant that your character all of a sudden lost a lot of their stats, and it completely fucked up your flow. There were no affixes or extra abilities to deal with, so it was like, yay, let's do these same dungeons again, like it's the beginning of the expansion. Only you wouldn't get items as rewards. You only got one mount, which you can no longer even get, even though technically you could use the exact same system for it, even with the new expansions. But my point here is that they are working on things, and they are taking into account the community perception, but their implementation is almost always lacking. What I find truly unfortunate about most new systems in WoW nowadays is the fact that Blizzard went through them to streamline the game to the point where you just do the content without putting any thought into it. Like how they removed the hit chance stat, so you don't have to care about meeting a required metric before you get into raiding or whatever. But in doing so, they always end up releasing stuff that either feels unfinished or is missing any sort of teeth. They're boring. And the scary thing is, they are much more comfortable releasing it like this and tweaking it over time until at the end of the expansion it becomes bearable. Then they remove it and bring something else that's newly broken. What the fuck? So my question to Blizz is, when are we going to get a fun and complete product? Sure, you can say BFA is a completely functional product because it has all its systems in place, but functional isn't enough. My toilet is functional, but I'm not particularly invested in spending my time around it, especially if it has a subscription attached to it. When is my money gonna be worth spending? Oh. Well, never mind then. BFA can choke on a huge cock!